This is Josh White with JW Math Tutoring. Today's video is going to go through all the background information that you need to know about the math section of the digital SAT before you start studying. Think of this video as a primer or an explainer for everything that you need to know about the Bluebook app, the test itself, and where to find tons of free resources for practice questions. So let's go ahead and get right to it.
But life is a dream the calculus could never predict.
All right, just before I begin, this digital SAT math primer video, which is going to go through basically an introduction to the digital SAT math sections, basically background info about the test, and go through a ton of free resources that are available. I just want to mention that this video is not going to talk about any math content. I mean, very, very little. It's also not really going to talk about digital SAT math strategies. I mean, I mentioned some of them briefly, but if you're looking for specific math-related content, check out my other videos on whether it's on the practice tests or strategies like backsolving and picking numbers. Or check out my other videos on Desmos, my Desmos Hacks series as well. This is only going to focus exclusively on information about the digital SAT math section and what you should know before you start studying for it. Okay, so let's go ahead now and start talking about it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Bluebook app. So the Bluebook app is what you use to take the digital SAT exam. It's installed on either a laptop, Mac, or Windows, an iPad, or it can also be done on a Chromebook. However, it can only be installed on school-issued Chromebooks. You cannot install the Bluebook app on your personal Chromebook. So just keep that in mind. You can see basically a screenshot, of what the sign-in screen looks like in the bottom corner here. Now, if you don't have a device to take the digital SAT exam, you can request to borrow one from the College Board when you register or sign up for your test date. You just have to make sure you choose or select that option again during the registration process. Then, what you're going to do is, you load the Bluebook app. You are going to sign in either using your College Board student account or the top thing, the sign-in ticket from your school. That's typically for if you're taking a school day, exam at your school. And then from there, you can either, if you're taking an official test, you can go ahead, and load the official test and complete that. Or also the Bluebook app is used to take practice tests, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. A couple things to keep in mind. So the Desmos Calculator is built into the math modules, both of them on the new digital SAT. I'll talk more about the Desmos Calculator a little bit later in this video. One thing to mention too is that if you are practicing outside of Bluebook, so you're just doing like, problems from the linear paper tests, or the Skills Insight tool, or from the question bank, there is a version of the Desmos Graphing Calculator on the Desmos website, which is basically identical to the version you find in the Bluebook app. The address is listed there on the screen. It'll also, all these, the web links, these addresses will be listed in the description of the video as well. But that's the version you want to use. You don't just want to go to desmos.com/calculator because that is not exactly the same as the version of Desmos you'll find in the Bluebook app. Okay, so please do keep that in mind. Now, inside the Bluebook app, as you're going through and completing a test, you can cross out or eliminate some of the answer choices as you're working on a problem. You can also annotate text. That doesn't really apply so much probably to the math section, but more for reading and writing. You can zoom in and zoom out, and I have the controls down there, at least on a Windows PC, on how to do that. You can also mark or flag kind of questions for review to come back on. There's also a countdown timer, which shows you how much time you have left. And also, I have the instructions on the screen here on how to go back to a default zoom. So one thing I just want to mention, the reason I listed zoom in and zoom out and default zoom here as commands, just to be familiar with, is because there are some problems where, because the answer choices are graphs, like you can't see the question and all four answer choices at the same time. So if you do not zoom out, to try to fit everything on the screen, then you have to constantly like scroll up and scroll down, especially if you're going through the process of elimination to try to match and see, okay, which of these graphs has a y-intercept of 4? Which of these has a slope of -2 or whatever you're looking for. So zoom in and zoom out can be helpful on, maybe one or two questions where you can't see all the answer choices just from like the default zoom level. Now, let's talk about the setup of the math sections for the test. So basically, you have two modules. Each module has 22 questions, and you have 35 minutes to complete each of those modules. So in total, you're looking at 70 minutes for 44 questions. That comes out to about 95 seconds per question on average. So you have a little bit more than a minute and 30 seconds. Now, the digital SAT is section adaptive, and so what that means is the performance or your score on module 1 will determine, which bank of questions you get for the second module. Basically, there are two options, either an easy module, which I call 2A, or a hard module, which I refer to as 2B. So if you do well on the first module, then you get the hard module. If you do, you could say not well or poorly on the first module, then you get the easier of the two second modules. And again, as I mentioned, both modules, both sections allow you to use a calculator throughout the entire test, whether it's the Desmos onboard calculator or an approved handheld calculator. I mean, they still have the same restrictions and rules in terms of handheld calculators, so just be aware of that. But you can bring a handheld calculator to use in addition to or in place of the Desmos calculator. Now, in terms of the scoring, basically the digital SAT is scored using something called item response theory. And so what happens is the questions are graded or scored differently based on a variety of factors. And one of the most important ones is the difficulty level. So on the paper-based SAT, essentially each question was worth 1 point. And however many, and then you just add up your total, and that gets converted into whatever your score is. So each question is essentially kind of worth the same, but that is not the case here. If you miss what they determine to be easy questions, then you lose more points off your score. If you miss what College Board labels as hard questions, then you lose fewer points off your score. Okay? So do keep that in mind, because if you are doing the practice tests, you know, you might see scores that don't quite make sense because maybe you missed more questions on one practice test but compared to another one, but you got a higher overall score. The reason that's happening is because of the breakdown for the specific questions that you missed. Now, another thing to keep in mind too is that basically, if you get the easier of the two second modules, what I call module 2A, essentially the maximum that you can get or that you can score, even if you got every single question correct on that the second module, is somewhere around like a 590, maybe a 600. And that kind of overlaps with the low end or the minimum you could get if you end up getting the harder module or module 2B. So in other words, even if you do well enough on the first module so that you get presented with the harder second module, even if you do very, very, very poorly on it, your score is still going to be like very close to the maximum score you could earn from, module 2A. So a lot of people are thinking about, have like mentioned or talked about, doing poorly intentionally on the first module so they get the easier second module, but it turns out that it doesn't really, that will not cause you to get a higher score necessarily, because the min from module 2B is right around in the same ballpark as the maximum you can get for module 2A. Now, within a module of the 22 questions, usually there's like 16 to 17 which are multiple choice, and then 5 or 6 which are free response. So um, you can, of course, on the multiple choice, you can use techniques, stuff like backsolving, picking numbers. I talk about that those in separate videos and other videos. So please, go check those out if you're looking for videos related to strategy and so on. This video again is just kind of like a background informational video, not getting into actual math content and not really getting into strategy either. And just the last thing, of course, this is different than a maybe a typical math test you might take in school because at least for the multiple choice questions, there is no partial credit. It's either right or it's wrong, and one of the answers is provided there. All right, so now let's talk a little bit more about the Bluebook app and specifically the practice tests that are inside of it. As you start talking about the various resources available, to study for the digital SAT math section. So the Bluebook app has 6 SAT full-length practice tests and also 2 full-length PSAT practice tests. So once you take a test and submit it, the scoring for it and the answers are going to be found on the My Practice College Board website. So you just go to that website, you log in with your College Board account, and then you can click on the specific practice test result, and it'll have have the score right there. Then every single question, it'll have the correct answer, it'll have your answer, and it'll have the solution. However, the explanations to the problems are typically done the traditional way, and a lot of times they can be complicated, difficult to understand, unnecessarily complex. They typically will not include, the shortcut techniques, like say back solving or picking numbers, or how you can solve these problems in Desmos. So what you need to do basically to practice, in the most efficient way possible is go to YouTube and look for videos that have better and more thorough explanations, including how to use Desmos to solve these problems. So you miss some questions on a Bluebook practice test, go to YouTube, find someone. I mean, I have currently have practice tests 1 through 5, all up there, all modules. And go to the specific problem and see how that individual solved it. And like for a lot of the problems on these tests, I show multiple ways to solve it. 2 ways, sometimes there's even 3 different ways you can solve a problem, including using Desmos. Another thing that you need to know is that the scoring for the practice tests in Bluebook does not tell you the specific domain and skill for each question. And so what I mean by that is you have 4 basic domains: algebra, advanced math, geometry and trigonometry, and problem solving and data analysis. Those are kind of like the 4 like broad, areas that make up the whole test. But then within each of those, you have different skills, which are kind of more individualized things. So some examples are like, right triangles, circles, linear equations in 1 variable, linear equations in 2 variables, exponential functions, stuff like that. Those are the skills. So what you need to do is access the link that I have here on the screen. And again, this will all be posted in the description of the video. Because it has PDF files that I made based off data that another tutor had pulled from the question bank. Because the Bluebook, practice test 1 through 4 questions are also in the question bank, which I'll talk about, a little bit later in this video. But these PDF files have the domain and skill for every question for practice test 1 through 4. So you go to these files and then you look up which questions you missed, and now you'll know, okay, what domain and what skill that you need to practice on, that you missed questions from. Because the Bluebook app, or the scoring specifically on the My Practice website will not tell you that, but these PDF files will tell you that. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that you can take only the reading and writing or the math sections when you complete a practice test. You do not need to go through and answer, the entire thing if you only intend to do part of it. All you have to do is start up the module. So you're in module 1, then click on the little question thing to bring up like basically the list of all the questions. You just jump to the last one and then click next. That'll load you to module 2. And technically, it'll load you to module 2A because all the questions in the first module will be graded as incorrect since you didn't answer any of them. Then repeat the same thing for module 2. Jump to the last question, hit next, and then if you were skipping the reading and writing to do math, first it'll come up with about taking the 10-minute break, skip that, and then next, and it'll send you right into module 1 of the math section. If you're doing the opposite, if you technically wanted to skip the math and, you would first complete the 2 reading and writing modules, then it'll give you a thing for the break, skip that, and then when you get to the math, you'll do this process, last question, next. Select the last question, next, and then it'll submit the entire test. Now, you can use the same process too to access the second module that you did not get when you completed the practice test the first time. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're taking a practice test and you go through and you get the easy of the 2 second modules. The way you can basically tell this is by the score. You know what I mean? Like you're looking at your overall score. If your overall score is less than 600, most likely you got the easier of the 2 second modules. So if you want to get the problems from the hard second module, all you have to do is you can go into start a new practice test for the same thing, go through module 1, just fill in all the correct answers, and you would get those from the My Practice website, the score report on My Practice, and then fill all those in. So the first module is completely correct, and then it'll put you into the harder second module, the 2B module. Now, if you wanted the opposite, let's say you did get the harder second module, but now you want to access the easier second module questions. Well, that one's actually much quicker. All you have to do is start a new practice test, go to module 1, and just jump to the end, leave everything blank, and hit next. And then that will dump you into the easier second module, the 2A module, because all the questions essentially you're skipping, so it's grading them all as wrong. Okay, so that's how you can get the easy questions if you completed the practice test and got the hard module, or the opposite. Get the hard questions if you completed the practice test and got the easy module. Now, just the last thing, last kind of bit of a piece of advice. Use these tests widely since there are only 6 of them. Okay? So you don't want to go and rush through and complete all 6 of these in the span of like 2 or 3 weeks, and then you still have, weeks or months left until your official test date. Next, let's talk about another study resource, and these are the linear non-adaptive paper tests. So there are also 6 linear non-adaptive paper tests, SAT, exams. There's also 2 PSAT paper linear non-adaptive tests as well. So these, obviously, because they're on paper, they just have 2 modules, which are fixed. Each module has 27 questions compared to the Bluebook app and the official, tests done in there, which have 22. So it's a little bit longer, 54 total versus 44 for the math. And these are scored just like the old paper SAT. Each question is worth the same amount. So if you complete the entire test, you just go through, correct it, mark the number you have correct, and just add that up and use the scale that they provide on each test, and that would give you the score. Now, the thing is, though, most of these questions are in the Bluebook practice tests. So when you look at a math perspective, okay, 6 paper SAT, linear non-adaptive paper SAT exams, 54 questions on total on each exam. That's 324 total questions, okay, across those 6 tests. Only 112 of those 324 questions are unique. And what I mean by that is those are the questions that do not appear on the Bluebook practice tests. So only about 34.5% of this total material are unique, non-duplicative questions. The rest of them, the other 65.5%, you're going to see them on the Bluebook practice tests. So you need to be aware of that and need to know which questions to skip so that you don't ruin, your performance on the Bluebook practice test by doing a question in advance and then coming across it on a Bluebook practice test where it's not brand new. Where it's something you've already seen and already done, because that will not give you a representative score of how you're really doing on those Bluebook tests. So these should be used for additional practice. But like I said, make sure you only do the unique non-overlapping questions. Now, how do you tell which questions are the ones that are unique and don't overlap? Great question. So I made some PDF files based on data that another tutor had extracted from the question bank. And essentially, if you go to the link provided here, and again, this will be in the description of the video, just from a post on Reddit, there are PDF files at that link, and those PDF files show you all of the unique questions, i.e. the questions on the linear paper tests, which are not in Bluebook, okay? And there's a file with answers and a file without answers, but that is what you use to determine which questions to do from the linear non-adaptive paper tests. Now, let's talk about the College Board Skills Insight tool. So these are practice questions, and they are broken down by score band for all 4 domains in the math section. So you basically have 14 total questions for each domain, and there are, again, 4 domains, like I mentioned earlier. So these are 56 basically practice questions. Now, these questions are in the question bank, so just be aware of that. But the reason that I do like to use these or highlight these is because, like I said, they're broken down into 7 different score bands. So there's all these ranges. Like the lowest range is like up to 360, and then it's like every 50 points, like 360 to 410, 410 to 460, 460 to 510, and so on and so forth until it gets to the highest range, which is like I think 680 and above. Each band has 2 questions in it. Okay, so the reason I like these is because instead of just in the question bank where it breaks everything down into like it's only easy, medium, or hard, these break it down a little bit further. And these give you an idea of like, okay, these are the questions you should be able to answer correctly if you're aiming for, I don't know, a 500, or if you're aiming for a 600, or if you're aiming for, 680 and above, and so on. So to access these, you can either go to the website, it's listed on the screen there, or you can also access PDF files that were made by another tutor of these questions. Now, one thing just to keep in mind, so on the website, if you go to access them, basically you choose the domain, then you choose the score band, and then at the bottom of the page, it'll say example 1, example 2. But you have to expand each of them. You have to click a plus sign to expand the question. But the way they have the formatting set up, the answer is like immediately under the question. So as soon as you expand it, you're going to see what the answer is right away without even having a chance, to solve it or like cover the screen. So that's why I like to use the PDF files instead of the website. So just do keep that in mind. Now, the College Board Question Bank, which I talked about earlier, basically has hundreds of practice questions in it, and they can be filtered by domain and also by difficulty level, also by skill. And there are several important things that you need to know about this. First, the question bank has all the questions from Bluebook Practice Tests 1 through 4 and also linear paper tests 1 through 4 as well. Okay. Tests 5 and 6, which were just released in the spring of 2024, are not in the question bank yet. They may be at some point in the future, but as of right now, it's just Bluebook Practice Tests 1 through 4 and Linear Paper Tests 1 through 4. All those questions are in there. So if you're working on the website, which is listed below, you want to make sure you exclude official test questions. They now have a flag at the top that you can click to do that. Previously, they did not, but now, fortunately, they do. So there's 741 total unique questions across all 4 of the domains. This does include, though, the 56 skills insight questions. Okay, so those are counted in that 741. So if you want to subtract those away, you're really looking at about like 685, unique additional questions, not including those. The only problem with these questions is that the explanations are typically done, again, the traditional way, which can be complicated, long, not easy to follow. And they don't show you the shortcut techniques. They don't show you how you can solve these in Desmos. So it's much better, again, if you have questions about how to solve one of these, to go to other places, either YouTube or the SAT subreddit, or I don't know, there's some servers on Discord for SAT prep. We can get the other ways to solve them there. Obviously, the website you can see, I already mentioned earlier, it's on the screen there where you can access the question bank. And there's also PDF files that have been made so you don't have to worry about accessing, the website or the website going down or not working. The PDF files are all broken up by domain and by difficulty level. So you can just download those files and save them and have them, and then work on the questions. You don't even have to be connected to the internet. Now, another great resource is some worksheets that have been created by another math tutor. Nickname goes by Tutorllini, but his real name Kyle Terracciano. He has created a bunch of digital SAT math practice worksheets, and with video explanations on YouTube for these worksheets. So there's the Ottocento series. These are usually 10 to 15 or some. I saw one of them had as many as 20 problems on a single topic, usually of easy to medium level difficulty. Um, there are a wide range of topics that these cover, and he just released the most recent one. I think it was like the 16th one, just came out yesterday. So these are again good, great practice, and the link to access these worksheets is down there. And for Google Drive. You can also obviously go to the individual videos of his where he has the solutions, and the link for each individual worksheet will be in the description of that video as well. In addition to that, he also has what he calls problem set worksheets. These are basically 7 hard problems across various topics, and he releases one essentially before each official SAT test date. So far he's released 7 of them. Again, these are challenging, difficult, module 2B, last like 4 or 5 problem usually types of problems. You can see the link on the screen there. Again, this will be in the description of the video below. And he also, as I mentioned, puts the video solutions on YouTube. Now, next thing I want to talk about is Desmos. So the Desmos calculator is built into the Bluebook app. You can use it for just basic calculations, for evaluating functions, graphing, and all kinds of other, unique and interesting stuff. Now, the Desmos calculator can solve many problems, but obviously it can't solve all of them. There's some you just, don't need a calculator for. It's a theory question essentially, or something to know from geometry or basic trig or whatever. Um, and the important thing is it can solve them in a much more quicker and more efficient manner than doing these problems the traditional way. Now, to familiarize yourself with Desmos, if you aren't really familiar with it or don't know about it, I have some options listed below. So Tutorllini, I mentioned him, on the last slide. He has an excellent Desmos playlist, which is currently up to 19 videos. The only thing to be aware of is the first 15 videos do include problems from Bluebook Practice Test 1 through 4. So really, you shouldn't watch the first 15 videos until you've completed all 4 of those practice tests, because again, it might spoil your result, your scores on them, because again, you're being introduced to the problems before you actually take the test itself. Another great resource, and this is actually something I use with my students, is a book by Dr. Ella Sharma. It's Desmos Graphing Calculator, Digital SAT Prep. It has a total, I think it's now the new version, which I just got, is up to, I think, like 60, almost 60 total, what she calls use cases. So different ways that you can use Desmos, and it's got a bunch of example problems. It's got a whole section of practice problems at the end. So it really is an excellent resource as well. Besides that, there's an official Desmos thread in the SAT subreddit, which has a lot of great tips there. I also have a Desmos operations worksheet, basically just kind of like a summary of the most common things to do in it, with notes and basically instructions. So you can access that as well to kind of use as again, kind of like a reference sheet. I also have been making videos showing, I call them, Desmos hacks. I've got them up so far for practice tests 1 through 4. Some what I would call non-common examples of how to use Desmos to solve problems. And there's also other, obviously, videos, out there as well. If you want to learn how to use Desmos and how to use it specifically to solve problems on the SAT math section. Now, so in conclusion, there are tons of free resources available. So the table you see on the screen here basically has a summary of the various options that you have for free SAT essentially practice problems, resources. So you have the Bluebook Practice Tests. Like I said, there's 6 of them. If you only do the 2 modules that you get when you first complete the test, you'd have 264 total questions. However, if you also add in the third module, i.e., the module you did not get from the second, from the second module, easy or hard, then you basically get up to around 380 total questions. The reason it's not just adding in, an extra 22 questions times the 6 tests is because there is some overlap. So, in other words, on most of the tests, there are at least somewhere in the ballpark of 2 or maybe 3 questions that are on both the easy and the hard second module. Then, if you add in the linear non-adaptive paper tests, there are 112 total unique questions among all 6 of those. Skills Insight tool, as I mentioned, has 56 total problems across all 4 domains. The question bank has 685 unique non-overlapping questions. And again, I'm excluding the Skills Insight tool. I'm like counting them separately. So that's why here it's 685, not the 741. And again, that's also excluding the Bluebook practice test and the linear non-adaptive paper test as well. Those are just the unique questions that don't appear anywhere else. And if you look at the worksheets, the kind of the 2 groups of them that were created, again, by Tutorllini, there's 176 current problems among the various Ottocento worksheets, and then among the 7 problem set worksheets, there's currently 49 total problems. So you add all that up, you're in the ballpark of around 1,460, total unique questions that are available completely free. And again, most of them officially, College Board designed problems, material. But the point is, there are tons of resources out there for you to study, to do self-study for the digital SAT math section. Now, I've mentioned some of the previous slides, but just to kind of hammer it home again, you want to use resources like YouTube, the SAT subreddit, Discord servers, possibly other places on the web to get explanations or information or resource documents or solutions, that you won't find in the College Board explanations, that you're not going to find in the Bluebook explanations or the question bank explanations or so on. Now, if you need practice on just a specific topic or a specific skill, like say practice factoring trinomials or solving equations, quadratic equations or solving linear equations or practice with right triangles or basic trig or whatever, you can also look for things like CUDA software or Edia.app. It's an excellent website that has a ton of worksheets, all categorized by topic. It's broken down by class, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, so on. So you have to know which class you're looking for. But within the class, it has, all the different kind of topics available. So those are other places you can go to get free practice problems, again, with answers. They won't have the full solution right now, but they'll at least have the answers so you can check your work if you need skill specific practice. Now, if you have questions, comments, thoughts about this video and all the content, please do leave them below. Of course, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, sign up for notifications as well. And check out all the other great, digital SAT math content that I have, available on the channel. There's explanations again for Bluebook practice tests. There's general strategy videos. I've got Desmos hacks, currently up for practice tests 1 through 4, and practice tests 5 and 6 will be up soon as well. I've got a 4-month study plan that you can follow, basically, an outline showing what to do every single week. So again, check out all that other content, but otherwise, be on the lookout for another digital SAT math related video very soon.